We'll start by reading the questions. The first question has to do with the Section 232 announcement that was made out of Washington, D.C. in April, May of this year. And I think that most of you, since you're involved in the trading business, have heard about the Sections 232 and how it affects the trade and what really happened from these. We heard from the speakers this morning that everybody shipped steel as quickly as possible during June and July, which caused a surge. And then since the Section 232 was expected to come shortly thereafter, then nobody, or very few, dared to ship things out because people weren't willing to take the risk of being hit by 5, 15, 20% extra duty. So the import into the United States in the fourth quarter is expected to be minimal. And if for those of you who read the Platts Steel report this morning, there was a statement from Wilbur Ross, the U.S. Commerce Secretary, who used to be the chairman of International Steel Group in the United States, for those of you who remember that the Sections 232 will come only after tax reform in the United States. Since there's no time prospect on tax reform in the United States, it means that Sections 232 is very uncertain. So I believe that that announcement will cause people to have a second look at making offers into the United States for all kinds of steel that can enter legally.
Well, the threat for the 232 is actually still stands. Okay, it's been a problem for all of us importing into the United States, and it's going to continue to be a problem for us because we don't know what the rules are. We don't know what they're going to decide. It's been postponed, and the reason why it was postponed is there was a serious pushback from the industry that uses the rebar or the materials, or total steel actually, and the fabricators, the end users, they all had they had a pushback to the government, and the government had to just take a step back. Originally, they were going to do that in June, but when they realized that the industry is totally against this, they had to stop and rethink about it. Now there's a rumor that they may go after the finished product business, which totally makes sense rather than the semi-finished or raw materials. So but it still stands. There's still a danger for all of us who import, but probably the effects will take longer than just, let's say, this year. Originally, we're thinking that's going to happen before the year end. It may take longer because of the other issues that the Trump administration have to follow.
And the second question is what are the alternative sources of rebars into the United States other than Turkish? From the speaker today, we learned that in the first half there was approximately 800,000 tons of rebars from Turkey. And all of the others added up together didn't even come up to 1/10 of that number. So there are always other sources of rebars. Rebars is a non-technical product as long as you know you can make it. But the Section 232 will obviously affect everybody, not just Turkey. Then the third question is, are the CIS producers able and willing to replace the Turkish supply into the USA market? Well, that depends on the demand of rebars in the Commonwealth of Independent States. And from what I understand, the prices for rebars has recently gone up in the Soviet, or not Soviet Union, but Russia.
Well, there was an import coming from Russia to the United States. But it stayed very small, so I don't think the CIS will really replace what the, let's say, Turks will do. In other words, come up to numbers like 800,000 tons. So I don't think that the material coming from the CIS can ever replace the quantities from Turkey. But having said that, material coming from Portugal, Spain, South America, and Mexico can easily replace that. So it's Turkey is replaceable, yes, but it will take time for the other countries to rev up to it. And keep in mind, you know, the domestic production can really cover itself. You know, U.S. doesn't have to really import rebar because we have extra capacity. It's just that there's always a gap there, but domestic can cover majority of it, and the rest, whatever is left, can be covered from the countries, like I say, the few countries, including Canada.
Why don't you take Algeria?
No, well, let's ask the. I think Ira can have a better opinion on this.
On the availability outside of Turkey?
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's been proven since the 232 was announced in June, as people have scrambled to find other sources, that the quantities, as you rightly said, Don, are smaller, and that other mills are not prepared today to drop their local markets
right.
or their traditional markets. I guess the Italians would be a great example.
Right.
As there was a gap when the Algerian orders stopped from Italy, as soon as that resumes, then bye-bye U.S. So, like you say, it would take time.
Yeah, because if you think about it, everybody is working around 70 to 75% capacity. So, you know, for those other countries to come up to that is not that difficult, but it takes time. And it takes some determination, and it takes for them to really believe that the market in the US will sustain that demand.
But then again, logistically, there are very few other origins that are prepared to sell 40,000 tons one month and put it on a boat the next month. I think, practically speaking, it's only China and Turkey who can do that. And that is what has been driving the imports into the United States. And to replace one vessel of 40,000 tons with 5 new businesses of 5,000 tons, it's a lot more work, and the logistic expenses go up.
And it's not only that. I think one of the major factors why some European mills do not like to sell rebars into the US is because of the request of air-cooled material, uniform piece count, theoretical weight invoicing, and stuff like that. So, and then to have blue material arrived in the port. So that all makes it difficult for mills which are used to temp core processing, which are even located in areas where it's warm in summertime. So you don't have this fast cooling down of the rebars. I mean, Turkey, of course, is also a very hot country. Don't get me wrong, but they are, yeah, they have, they've put their production on that. They have experience on that, and other mills producing a lot of material with temp core process, they rather prefer to do that, and they are not yet able and willing to do that. Of course, as bigger the profit can be, they will start it. But as long as it's just a headache and a delay in the production process, and they don't get the costs back for that, then they will look for other alternatives.
But Willie, when the market of 1 million ton, when there's a demand for 1 million ton, market adjusts. One, prices can go up, and then that will increase, you know, that will increase chances for Europeans to come in. And some of the customers, if they can't find steel, they'll be happy to take the temp core steel. So it really is an adjustment to the market. Today there is no need, but given the fact that the conditions change,
absolutely,
people change. That's what the market economy is all about.
Absolutely.
You can go to your next question, my friend.
Okay, we come to the next question. It's about the Algerian market. So 2 questions to that. Algerian authorities, through import license, reduced rebar imports by half. How serious is the situation for Italian exporters in particular and the European market? Yeah, it is a fact that Algeria this year has announced import license for about 1 million tons. It was 50% of what it was last year. You all may know that there are new production facilities just opened. One is from Tosyali, the other one is from ArcelorMittal, and maybe a third one, I'm not 100% sure. Qatar Steel. So they have now 3 production lines, and from what I was told is that the capacity which is in place already is exceeding the demand. But because of some, inefficient production and sometimes not quick deliveries, still people are looking for European material. Also price-wise, it's sometimes cheaper than the local material. The 1 million tons which are missing now, they have to find a way anywhere else. But in fact, it's for the Italians a big dilemma, because they are not surrounded by other areas where they can dispose those tonnages. Transportation is an issue. If they come, for example, to Germany, they have to do it by rail cars. Trucking costs are extremely expensive, and the mills are also not very close to the sea, so their transport costs are already big. And they are surrounded by other nations which have their mills, like the Spanish steel industry. We know the French steel industry. The Germans also have 4 mills to produce rebars in Poland and everywhere else. So a logical market definitely would be America or maybe Canada. But again, then it starts with piece count, TEMCOR, non-TEMCOR processed material, and which so far obviously is not good enough and not paying the effort they would have to do. So I think it will lead for Italy to a reduction of capacities, rather than finding really new markets, although they increased a little bit their share in Germany lately. But I think it will be difficult. But maybe there is someone here from Italy who has an idea or who has an opinion to that.
I don't think we have any Italians.
Not really. And also for the others, like for the Spanish mills, for the Greek mills, it is a real burden. I've spoken to Greek mills today, and certainly they are missing the volumes from Algeria, because it is a very logical place of supply for them, with the advantage of 15% duty against non-EU countries. They can even compete against the Turkish, and that gave them a real relief and a real nice market, which is now halved.
And might disappear in 1 year.
And may disappear pretty soon, and maybe not even that, maybe even seeing them as a competitor in not too long future. So that answered already the second question.
We have Turkey.
Well, next couple of questions on Turkey. And the first question is, for the last couple of months, we have seen strong demand in Turkish market for debars, and export was not a priority for Turkish producers. Domestically, prices were high, and the question comes as, can the domestic market consumption in Turkey cover the whole entire producer's capacities in terms of volume? Well, the answer is no, because I tried to get the statistics today. The Turkey produces close to 36 million tons of steel. Out of that is 24 million tons is long products. And I think out of that is at least 16 million tons is rebar. So the domestic consumption is about 10 million tons. So there is close to 6 million, maybe more, that needs to be exported, no matter what. So capacity that they have is, Turkey has to export no matter what. Any other comments from the audience about Turkish production? And the second question on that one is, can the Turkish producers cover two directions same time? Domestic market with the high price and export with the lower price. Do they have capacities? Well, of course not. You cannot just sell domestically low, and high price and export in a low price, especially if you're selling to the United States. We have reviews on Turkish steel, almost yearly. So if they do that, they will be penalized for it. I don't know about the other countries. I don't know the conditions in, let's say, in the Middle East. I don't know if there is such cases that are involved. I think there's some. Egypt has anti-dumping against Turkey and works on that one. So really the answer is no. I know for a fact that when the Turks are selling to the U.S., they constantly monitor and check with their domestic prices and sell that accordingly. So there's no such thing as, they'll sell one price here and the other price and kind of lower price export. Again, I don't know what happens to certain countries, like let's say to Iraq or to neighboring countries, what they do. I don't know the rules. Is there anybody who knows better, can comment on this one?
I just have a question for you. The Turks have been selling some tons to Asia these days, and how does that figure into the equation?
Asia, like when you say Asia, what country?
I've heard of Turkish sales, Singapore.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really not even familiar with the destination.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, yeah. Well, Turkey used, in 1990s, Turkey sold a whole lot of tons into Singapore, in Hong Kong. And I remember we used to sell even to Korea before that they had the Olympics there. So these are really the old traditional markets for Turkey. So when the Chinese prices started going up, China didn't want to feed the Far Eastern countries with their cheaper steel, and there was time that Turkish steel was probably a little bit better priced, but they're very price sensitive in those countries because they do buy big quantities. And yes, they were right. You're right. They did import some of those.
Yeah, Singapore opened up with the first big market that when the prices went over $500 CNF, and there were several large quantity deals made at $525, $535, and the prices went up to around $565, and that's peaked now, so it's coming back down. So Singapore views Turkey as a traditional supplier, as does Hong Kong. China. So this refers to China. Are the price increases that we have seen in China for both long and flats spurred by different internal market forces, one reinforcing the other, or is it a fact of very clear government policy? Which is the vector? Well, prices in China have gone basically from 3,000 RMB to over 4,000 RMB for hot rolled products in a very short period of time. And when you think of the total volume of production in China, it baffles the mind to figure out how much money is being taken from customers and given to steel producers. And the margin in between the Fe iron ore price and the billet price has increased exponentially in China. And I've been told by people who are more knowledgeable than myself that some of the efficient blast furnace mills have a net profit of 1,000 RMB per ton on every ton of steel that they produce from iron ore. And the currency is what, 6.57 to the dollar. So you can figure out it's a lot of money. So China basically, why the prices went up, the market decided that the prices will go up. I don't think there's any guiding hand as to increase prices on purpose.
Yeah.
But the situation was that the futures market looked positive, the infrastructure spending was there, and then the black swan appeared in the form of induction furnaces. And we heard a representative of the China Steel Institute amazingly say that nobody knew how many tons were being produced by the induction furnaces. And a lot of them were operating at nighttime and nobody could see if there was any steel being made. So we're talking about the wild, wild west in steel production. And in the beginning, I think the government thought it was like 50 million tons, and the financial speculators thought it was 50 million tons, and it turned out to be 120 million. And so the production costs in blast furnace mills to make slab or billet are the same. So obviously everyone thought there was going to be a big shortage of billets, and they were right, and the futures market went up on both flats and longs. And
so
then the snowball got bigger and bigger.
No, but definitely the capacity which was made idle was a theoretical capacity of around 120 million. But what was an actual reduction to that, I think nobody really knows. It goes from 30 million to 50 and 60 million, so that is really wild, wild west in regard of numbers. So it's very difficult to say, but one thing is clear, a massive amount of long products have been taken off from the market because of pollution, because of governmental decisions to make them idle. And in reverse, those officially operating mills got all of a sudden quite a huge extra demand. And on top, also infrastructure programs were taken up, housing, all sorts of bridges, constructions. So, yeah, definitely the demand increased in China, and with the simultaneous reduction of capacities, it led to a shortage, and the shortage leads to higher prices.
That's on one side, but where the government policy plays a big role is the environmental rules in China, which have gone from being nothing to be like the state of California in some certain circumstances. You heard the Chinese speaker today mention that the very efficient and clean mills, they have no restrictions. You know, that's an amazing public policy, but that's an effective what's happening. And the ones that are inefficient are being cut back more. But he says that the average will be around 50% in the province of Hebei. And when the market found out that there was going to be restrictions on production, then of course that led to further speculation that the prices would go up. And then on the other hand, the efficient blast furnace mills, they want to have the best iron ore. And so everyone went after to get 67 to 73% iron ore. And the price spread in between low quality ore and high quality ore grew dramatically. So it's like 55% iron ore is like $55, and 71% is $100 a ton. And so that brought more high-grade ore and more efficient production, and that got the ball rolling, and the production increased in China.
I mean, actually, if you think about it, it's quite normal for China to just first take out the, old and inefficient mills out. So why should they put a restriction on a mill that produces, with the newer technology? The restrictions on the air quality still stands for everybody, but they really had to invite or maybe force the unproductive mills to go out of, and most of them are the induction mills, and the result is actually shown. So is it the government vector, the question? Yes, it is. Government is the one that's directing it, and there's a lot of international pressure on China to reduce the capacities, actual production. But sadly, I understand the production didn't change much But the capacities, they did take out the capacity, because whatever they took out from the induction mills, the other blast mills and newer mills took that capacity.
Second question is billets. Will China come back to the billet market? The answer is yes, but nobody knows when. China produces between 350 and 400 million tons of billets and blooms per year. So obviously, if China sneezes, the rest of the world will catch a cold. So we have to wait and be prepared.
Well,
is there an alternative opinion?
If the prices of scrap keep going up, then you will see that the Chinese have an advantage over the blast furnaces. So yes, they can sell billets at that time. But right now we see the trend actually for the billets to come down. So it's going to be tougher for them to do that.
Is there someone that would like to say something about China? Everyone has an opinion about China here.
And something nice for a change. Nobody has anything nice to say. Okay, then let's move on.
Iron ore stocks at Chinese ports reached record high levels this year, and prices also went up, but are softening lately. What are the expectations for iron ore prices? Does anyone have an opinion on that?
Well, if you look at the trend now, it's down. So, I can see that it's going even below 60. Why not? There's really no power. There's no really, good use for it, for the prices to go up. Sometimes when you see these prices go beyond certain limit, it's really arbitrary, and those prices eventually do come down. So I don't know the exact answer, but possibility, yes.
I have a question about just in general. The speaker this morning, the economist, was talking about how over-leveraged the whole Chinese banking system is, blah, blah, blah. Remember a year ago or so, there was an issue with commodities in general being sold over and over again, and nobody had the receipts, or banks were holding the bag without any iron ore or copper or whatever it was. Has that changed? Has anything come out of that? I just haven't heard anything.
Well, very good question, actually. I always thought about that, because for the longest time they had these stories that we hear about, China is going to go bankrupt because people can't pay their bills and there's so much this and that. Reality is people are underestimating the intelligence of the Chinese. I think that they have a system, and their system works. And, you just can't produce 600 million tons, 700 million tons of steel without any, proper methodology. Having said that, when you produce that quantity of steel, there was always imperfections. There was always some stuff that we can hear. There's always some problems, but these are all not as, not as big as people exaggerate. So the stories that because we used to hear in the US is like, oh, the banking system is going to fail because nobody's paying their debt. Well, China's got so much money, they cover that. So I start thinking that it's all hype.
Second question is billets versus scrap for the electric arc furnace and electric arc furnace versus BOF in terms of production cost. Who do you like for the next 6 months? I think from what we heard yesterday in our preparation meetings and what we heard today on the costs of electrodes, on the shortage of electrodes, especially for the needle coke, a word which honestly I just learned a few weeks ago and didn't know that it's really needed for production of steel. So seeing also that iron ore prices are weakening, so asking me for the time being, I would probably prefer to be a blast furnace operator rather than an electric arc furnace operator, unless I have sufficient electrodes in my yard and can wait till the rest is drying out. So, but again, this is a reflection of the moment. We all don't know, and I think not even the electric arc furnace mills know for now how long and what period of time they will be really sitting on a short delivery of electrodes. So maybe things are changing fast. We have seen so many changes from last IREPAS to now, things which we did not believe. Prices from being extremely low, everybody thinking that the prices will go up. It was exactly the opposite. Everything went down. We had, in summer, the lowest prices ever, in June, July, at least in Europe, and then all of a sudden we have an increase of 110 euros and nobody knows why. So is it a shortage? No, there was not really a shortage. Was it demand? Yeah, there was a demand, but it's also a lot of psychological things. People who believe that the prices is going to drop, but then they are proven that prices is not dropping, but stable, and then as less the stocks are, and by the moment you have to buy, then you have to accept any price, especially for a quick delivery. So I think there is...
I think even the long game gives benefit to blast furnace mills because, for example, in Turkey, the largest scrap importer in the world, one major mill announced a project 3 weeks ago to build a blast furnace, going from scrap to blast furnace. So the investment period for a blast furnace in Turkey is probably 5 years to be fully operational. So they're making a big bet on that way.
Yeah. When you ask a question, which one do you like? You know, it really is not to our liking. You know, the realities change, and the blast furnace obviously has an advantage of you know, iron ore being, you know, more abundant and cheaper, and but the electric arc furnace, they can go up very fast, and then if the scrap prices is cheap, they can really produce, you know, good quality and cheaper material. So this differences change from time to time, and I think that the electrode problem is a problem that is to be recognized, and it from what I understand, it affects the electric arc furnace more than the blast furnace. But having said that, I just learned that even on the blast furnace, they do use electrodes, or even those smaller ones, for the lateral furnace. So it's not like it's only to the related to the electric arc furnace. The other one is also affected. So really, if you want to compare, the main thing is the iron ore, and today iron ore the prices are you know, relatively cheaper to scrap, so I think the iron ore blast furnace makes sense. But as far as new investments, it's a huge investment to start up, so if you're going to start a mill like you mentioned in Turkey, I don't understand the logic behind that. But any other comments on this one?
Don, take the next question there.
Okay.
Miscellaneous.
All right. In today's economy, more and more customers prefer to deal directly with the suppliers rather than deal with the traders, wow, who usually are more expensive. Regarding that, I would like to know what is the added value of traders that could convince the customers to deal with them even if the cost is higher. Well, loaded question. Well, reality is this. The customer will always buy from a cheaper source, period. So we as the traders cannot just go to our customer and we'll say, well, we'll charge you $20 more, but we're nicer guys. So at the end of the day, the reason why they buy from you, or they should buy from you, is the additional services that you provide. One of which is financing. The mills usually don't like to finance. They would like to get paid as soon as they ship or deliver. and the traders do finance. And sometimes our financing, especially in the US, goes to 90 days and sometimes even beyond. The second thing is we control the deliveries, we control the distribution. So some of the mills that provide the product does not always have the product ready for shipment, and they will not really do the same deliveries that we do. Having said that, mills will always have advantage over you because they will have better pricing than you do. Again, one more thing I'm going to add is on location. Okay, the traders, if you're selling from a mill in the United States from a location, let's say in Alabama, and your customer is in Houston, well, the trader has an advantage because you can come with a boat cheaper than the guy can truck it from Alabama to Houston. So really transportation has a factor to it. At the end of the day, if it comes back to the customer's yard, customer will buy from a cheaper source, period.
But to add to that answer, Don, is that a trader has to add value. And as you correctly said, just because of your nice appearance, no one is really paying 20 euros, maybe 1 euro or 2 euros. Right. But other than that, you have to add value, and that it's all about to be a trader, not just to be between a supplier and a customer, a consumer, but to add value. The value adding can be already the language. I mean, in some areas, I would not be able to find my way simply because of the language and the type of writing. The next is financing, of course, logistic. Who is providing a vessel? Who has a know-how where to get the material to discharging, to find the right stevedores, letters of credits, of course, and. So to provide a service through all the supply chain, and then it's not only up to the customer, but also up to you as a trader, for what margin are you doing the service?
All right.
Are you doing it for 2 euros but you take a $20 risk? I wouldn't.
You'll be out of business soon.
And you will be out of business soon. And just remember, guys, there were times when in 2008, 2009, when we had this huge price increase from $300 to $1,000, and all of a sudden, the house of cards broke together, and then the trader was mostly the one suffering. The mills reneged when the prices went up, the customers reneged when the prices fell down. Yeah, and the trader was
that point is very, very important. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. That is something that we always tell our customers, that you're basically hedging with us. When you buy the product today, and we're going to deliver it to you in January, you're fixing your price today for January. Having said that, when you buy from a domestic mill, in January, you don't know what the price is going to be. So the advantage that you give to them is the hedging, so they can, in January or in 6 months, 3 months, whenever you're delivering, that price is fixed, and we do not change. But domestic mills can change. Many, many years ago, I used to think that we are as good as the domestic mills because we hold our prices and we hold our word, and whatever we say is going to stick. But like you said, in I think 2004 was the first one that all the domestic mills just immediately changed their prices, and they did not honor their contracts. I'm talking about in the US, of course. So that's the time that we proved to the customers, that whatever they bought from us, we still delivered. And we have to deal with the mills. That was our problem. And the second thing is, because we buy in big volumes, we can negotiate with mills much better than a customer who buys a few hundred tons.
And we have a question here. We as traders find 2017 a difficult year to transact business. On one side, we face political restrictions. On the other side, we face compressing margins. One would say it is very difficult to make a normal margin. Question is this a short-term phenomenon, or is a long-term change in the way things work? I would just like to open for this question that in 2017, we learned that performance risk is suddenly increased. There were a lot of cancellations out of CIS, a lot of cancellations out of China when the prices went up. And we have the political risk of having to manage imports into countries that may put up import barriers. Generally, the contracts state that export tariffs and import tariffs is for somebody's responsibility, but nobody wants to pay for it. And with the rising pricing around the world, and at the same time having a shortage, which usually goes hand in hand, obviously it's very difficult to do back-to-back business. And back-to-back business, I think from every discussion I've had here with a trader at this conference, most people are drawing the conclusion that back-to-back business is generally dead unless you're doing 500 tons from Turkey to Italy or 300 tons from Holland to Switzerland or something like that. So obviously this is affecting the situation. But I think the biggest thing that the traders are feeling is that there's a lack of quantity being moved long distances. I mean, traders are generally prefer to do bigger tonnage and longer distances and being able to finance the transaction because it takes longer time to ship and so forth. But with China reducing its exports this year by around 30%, as we heard from the speaker today, that means that there's 30% less steel being handled. And a lot of that 30% that has disappeared were handled by Chinese domestic traders before because they entered into the market fray in 2015, 2016. And so they've lost business and a lot of them have disappeared. Whereas we are sitting here managing businesses in Europe and North America and South America, and we need to have a certain volume to pay our overheads. So, and people are chasing every business now in order to maintain total volume, and that of course compresses margins. Those are my 2 cents on the topic. Someone else have a different or an augmented statement or theory? Milan, please say a few words.
Well, if everybody's convinced that back-to-back trading's done, then maybe it's time to get into back-to-back trading.
That's it, be a contrarian. That's what I was expecting Milan to say. Please give Milan a microphone. No, that's good. No, he'll come up with something else before he...
Now, I would say that in the last 2 years, we've witnessed sudden and big changes in the trade flows and the direction of steel in the world. So as long as you have traditional, repetitive business going from Turkey to America, like in the past, or other places, Russia to Saudi or something, then obviously trader will slowly lose his function. But there have been dramatic changes in the trade flows where the trader finally plays a function in a back-to-back trade as well, not only in financing and open terms insurance covers and all this. So there are sudden changes happening all across the world, and I think that's been present in the last one and a half year. And now with USA changing, you have to find new sources, so the trader now plays a function there. And if China exports less, the trader obviously has to fill up the gap in supply in the areas where there's a material missing. And you mentioned before that China exported less, but we have seen in last year that China exported 31 million tons of billets. This year it's about 6.5 so far, so it will be probably 9 million by the end of the year. So there's a big lack of billets in the market, and 70% of that lack is in the Far East. So there's huge tonnage missing, which needs to be replaced from other places.
Milan brings up an excellent point about the changing trade flows, because obviously it's a lot more difficult to start a new trade flow, and you have to work harder, you have to think about new risks, and logistics usually are a lagging thing, that it's expensive when you want to move something from point A to B that nobody else has done before, and that means that those first kind of businesses are done usually with a much lower margin, but once you get to know all the risk and know all the ins and outs about, hopefully that will create a trade flow that will work for you as a trader, and it will be a more secure business. It's basically what all traders are looking for.
Then everybody else will join, and then they'll take your...
Yeah, but isn't it that for the last 3 decades we have to reinvent ourselves almost year to year? If I remember when I started, we had a traditional flow from Italy to France. Yeah, that was a huge business for a couple of years. Then remember the times when Spain consumed 6 million tons of rebars. Yeah? And Saudi Arabia consumed, then we shipped to China, now we get the material from China. So in 30 years, I wonder if there were really 2 consecutive years where I did what I did before. And so it's really changing a lot. And even now, the last 3 years, the origins we brought into Europe are from east to far east to middle of Europe, anywhere. So it's really changing, and that is our challenge. But you have to follow that trend, and it's not only because of trade cases. It's sometimes a matter of currency. Yeah, all of a sudden the dollar is getting good for imports again. Next time it's bad for imports. So yeah, this is our constant battle. We have to fight, and the good one is to succeed.
Do you want me to talk about that? Yeah.
Can we have a microphone here?
So I'm coming from the shipping part, so if you allow me to say a couple of things regarding this connection between the traders and the supplier or the producers. I would say that it's a little bit more to say about each individual, let's say, when you talk about selling steel. And first of all, I would say that the trader is basically the flexible part here, because there are so many things to put together, like the logistic from the mill into the port, loading rate, discharging rate. And I have to say that during the period of, since I'm working in shipping, I found very flexible traders, they were trying to develop certain trade, but by selling not 20,000 or 25,000, there was a big, excuse me.
It could be a customer.
That's exactly it. The fact that they were flexible on the quantities, they made the business possible. The fact that they were negotiating with the port for a better loading or discharging rate made the business possible. And this is basically makes the things, let's say, on certain markets, like also parceling, because if you say, if you sell 5,000 tons as a par cargo and you want to have a good price, you are taking advantage of the base cargo, and then you can reach the price. So I believe the traders are looking to all these aspects. Of course, if the producer is having a trading department, can do the same. But here we are basically making a difference between the producer and the trader.
You know, thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate you mentioned that, because in early 80s, when I started the business out of Turkey, Turkey hadn't shipped 1 ton of steel to the US. And it wasn't like the mills were producing steel, but even it was nothing like the ones that we would import today. So we had to first teach them how to produce the way we want, control the standards, find the shipping, put them together. So many things that we had to do before we can bring it up there. Now rebar sounds like everybody knows and everybody followed the old route, so it's easy. But we still do trade some steel products that are so complicated that we had to make our own standards, and we have to have our own specs, and the mills have to produce to our specs, SEBA specs, so that they can meet more than one customer in the US. So really, we do a lot more complicated things than just buying and selling, you know. It's just, but I really didn't want to get into that because I know that we only talk about rebar, and rebar is kind of like already been, you know, figured out by so many people, so it's not that complicated. But really, when you talk about traders, rebar is not the only thing we trade, and there are certain steel products that really needs highly specified and quality engineers to check, and we have to have our own engineers on the job, going to the mills and directing the quality with the mills to make the quality with the mills. So if you let them alone, they're not going to be able to produce that quality, because we know what our customers want, we know what the end use is, so we produce the steel to that. So it's not really that just it's only not the price, because sometimes the customer comes to us because they need to assure the quality is coming from, you know, second world country. So there's a lot more we do than just fix the price. And shipping is important because we have to put together so many different, you know, products into one ship, so we can cover it and make it cheaper. So the customer, if he wants to buy his few thousand tons directly, he's not going to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Someone like to raise an independent question? We've had a lot of discussion, I think, on the sidelines and also officially about the increased costs of electric arc furnace steel coming from 3 areas: graphite electrodes, refractories, and ferroalloys. So there are a lot of people in the producers meeting in the next floor that are very concerned about that. And we've also seen that force majeure has been declared here and there on the graphite electrode supply. And one thing is for sure, that if you don't have graphite electrodes, it doesn't matter how much scrap or how much rolling space you have or how good your order book is. If you can't melt it, you can't invoice it. So this obviously throws a new spanner into the equation. And the presentation made by CELSA calculated that they have a cost increase of 40 euros a ton. And since graphite electrodes and ferroalloys are international products and refractories as well, that means that everybody around the world, if CELSA thinks it's 40 euros a ton, you know, we're looking at big money in the States and big money in China, big money everywhere. So that is a major concern, and it becomes a major cost factor in predominantly in the Western world. Rebars and wire rod are made from scrap, whereas in China, India, and Russia and Ukraine, they're made from iron ore predominantly. So that's one thing that everyone should be very concerned about, and it's possible that someone in this room will book 20,000 tons of rebar for January shipment from some mill and open the LC on time and sell the material and have a great customer relationship, and come December they get an email from the producer saying, force majeure, we don't have the electrodes. If you can find some, we'll produce it for you.
Let me ask you a question to everyone here. The electrode prices went up from, you know, $2,000 a ton to $30,000 a ton, huge increase. How many of you think that this is, obviously this is too much, but how many of you think that there is really a need behind it? How many of you do, you know, I just think that this is just arbitrary and somebody's trying to make, you know, good money? Let me ask the first one. How many of you think that this is real and there's a reason behind it, and then this price increase will stick?
Ira? You have a strong voice, you can talk before the microphone.
No, he's voting.
He just voted.
Oh, you're voting.
No, I'm voting, yeah. I think, I mean, with the publicity and et cetera, and from what we've heard, I think that it would be foolish to think there wasn't something burning here.
So-
Whether the price sticks, probably not, right? I mean,
Well,
you come back online.
so the rest of you think that this price will go back to the original levels? Well, yeah. Well, one thing I did some research really last night on it, and I found out that there's an industry that's growing very fast that also use the graphite electrodes. That is the lithium-ion battery. So we use the same graphite electrodes in the lithium-ion batteries. And if you think about the electrical cars, the battery-operated electrical cars, that industry is going to grow fast. So the increase in the usage of the graphite electrode is going to really take off.
So Tesla is to blame.
Say again?
Tesla is to blame.
Well, Tesla or now, well, I just read that China is going to produce all their cars in such a short time period that it's all going to be electrical cars. So if they're gearing up for that, then there is really some reality behind it. And so the limited use that you can make it from two sources, from what I understand. One is basically oil product, and the second one is coal, special coal for it. But at least the coal majority, 100%, is controlled by China, is a limited quantity. And when Chinese want to control the supposedly air pollution because of the coal, that they have reduced the quantities on it, and that's why you have this price increase. So will it stick at the the highest level, $30,000, whatever? Probably not. But will it come back to $3,000 level? Maybe not either.
Just as a small clarification, it's the same raw product that goes into making graphite electrodes that goes into make lithium batteries, and it's called needle coke.
Yeah.
So we're not putting graphite electrodes into car batteries.
Not yet.
Yeah. Well, but the needle coke situation, as I understand it, is it's a heavy polluting industry, and people have been getting out of it around the world. And it didn't have high margins, and so people got out of it. So with the high prices, people will get back into it, and eventually it will regulate itself. But obviously, if the lithium battery production process mandates to have needle coke, it will be a short product for years to come. And that is a substantial concern for people who are making steel from electric arc.
But on your question, remind me that we eventually should raise our traditional question in regard of price development over the next couple of months to come. Whether we see it, or the majority of you see it, stable, down, or up. I think it's always a part of our...
You mean the rebar prices?
Yeah, the rebar long product prices, rebar wire rod, let's say. So
my guess, ask.
I think it's our traditional question. So who of you think that, let's say, up to next IREPAS, which will be in May, well, it's far away.
Make it 3 months. That's enough.
Make it 3 months. Yeah, I just remind the next IREPAS is in May. So yeah, who is believing or thinking, hoping that prices for the next 3 months are going up? Who? No. Oh,
Nobody.
One. Okay. One.
One, except
1, 2. Okay. Who believes prices will be stable? 1, 2, 3. 4. So, can I assume the rest of you believe the price goes down? Please raise your hand. That's amazing.
It has to go
Wow,
down.
everybody's on one side of the boat, right?
That's amazing. Because especially after this electrode issue, I really thought that...
Well, electrode issue is $40 a ton, for God's sake. I mean, if you lower the price of scrap by to $40, you're just equalized it.
That's right.
That's it. So really, it should come down.
The electrodes are per electrode,
$30,000, or
Per ton.
electrodes are sold by pound, by ton?
Ton.
By ton, by
They are
metric,
sold
by
by
metric
ton?
ton, yes. Yeah. Oh, you can buy it by the pound also if you're in that market. I'd like to put a new twist on the expectations of the market. You know, the market prices in the world today are quite evenly distributed. There's no market that is $100 below or above anywhere else. And if you look at Japanese exports of rebars are probably the lowest price rebars fob stowed anywhere around. But the Japanese mills that are selling these things, they make those billets from graphite electrodes. There's no blast furnace export from Japan. And they may reconsider their low prices, even though, because they have to be able to conserve graphite electrodes for their domestic market, which is 97% of their production. And the United States may also want to consider, because there's no rebars made from blast furnaces in the United States.
I mean, Japanese trade is a funny trade, you know. When Japanese, imagine you know, when you have money in your bank, you have to pay to the bank, you know. It's
Yes.
negative interest rates, you know. So in a market like that, I think the only time that they really want to export is they look at the currency, you know, values, and if the currency is to their advantage, they ship. But you can't depend on the, you know, for rebar, I'm talking about, for the low margin products. High margin products, they ship all the time. But for low margin products, they just go with you know, looking at the parities, and if the parity allows, they ship. If not, they won't ship.
In the European market, we heard Celso's presentation. Okay, they're a producer and seller of rebar, but you know, the numbers are apparently correct that the consumption of rebars is going up. They say that there's 13, 14 million tons of rebar production in Europe. European market is doing much better than anyone had planned or forecasted. And we're still waiting for the second bump of Donald's infrastructure package. So I hope it's not the second dump. But this is, there are a lot of things going on, dynamics. I think that nobody in this room, including this table, can predict where the prices will be in 3 months' time.
We're just guessing.
As you said, China can reduce their profits to $130 maybe.
Yeah.
30.
Yeah.
It can go down $100 easily.
Yeah, it could, yes. And,
Actually, with his numbers, they have a margin. They do have the margin. If they want to, they can do that, yes.
Yeah, but you know, 2 years ago, the major mills in China, they were earning 5 RMB on each ton that went out the door. The same people are doing it and earning 1,000 RMB now.
So we as traders really need to negotiate better. sounds like we are not doing a good job. If the mills are making so much money, we're not doing a good job. We should negotiate better pricing from our mills. Doesn't it sound like that?
The problem is, while you're negotiating, someone else is closing the deal.
Let them have
What
it.
are the Turkish mills making on their rebar today, Don, would you say? Kind of margin?
Today, good.
Good margin?
Today, yes.
Good
But typically they don't.
Pardon?
Typically they don't. You know, Turks are survivors. You know, they can work with $10
Yeah.
at times. If the market allows, they'll go to 100. Don't get me wrong, but they can survive at $10, and I've seen them do that.
Oh, sure.
Sure, they survive.
Any other comments that you guys want to discuss? We need more support from you guys. Because it shouldn't be only our opinion, it should be your opinion that we want to discuss.
Half of them are giving up on the steel trade and moving into graphite electrode industry. That's how they buy it.
But maybe one more information from IREPAS side. In this event here, we have 419 people, which is number 3 highest amount of participants. 130 from producer side, 30% from Turkey,
Yeah.
which
It's a normal
certainly due to the
percentage.
logistic. And yeah, but it also shows that the interest in this meeting and gathering is extremely high, stays high, and
there are 76 from the raw materials side here, which is the highest number ever. So they want to stay close to their customers.
They want to convince us that they're right. The price should go up, but it's not going to happen. Frankly, I always look at the pricing on the scrap. Anytime we goes below 250, you know, I mean, it goes above 250, I know it's going to just really struggle. And really, the margin, the bracket I see is 250 to 300 works. Past 300, it's going to eventually come down, maybe sooner than later. And when it goes below 250, it's going to go up, and would go up with a vengeance very fast, because people don't want to collect scrap anymore at those numbers. So when we went from 270 to 360, it just didn't make sense anyway. So it went down, and it probably still has some room to go down.
Remember, the last person who bought the 360, he was sure he's making a good deal.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. And there is abundance of scrap, guys. There's, you know, you can't say there's not enough scrap. There is scrap. In fact, in today's world, we have abundance of all commodities. Abundance of all commodities. So when somebody tells you that, well, there's a shortage of this one, it's only the price. Everything is there. Once you have the price for it, it's going to be very much available, and there's no shortage of anything so far, including oil. Remember, they used to tell us there's not enough oil, that we're going to run out of oil in 2020. Well, that story is an old story too. So this is the same story I hear from the scrap people. It's going to run out, it's going to run out. Never does. And now that there's Chinese really going to produce scrap, and Chinese is going to be one of the largest scrap users or exporters, because they're doing the same thing. And done. We'll just wrap up.
Okay, it's shortly 4 p.m. in Athens, and at 5 o'clock there is a networking cocktail, right?
Yep.
And it's
from 5 to 7.
It's on the first floor, not on the roof as we had last night, which was an excellent venue. Wonderful. Fantastic. So thank you very much for coming, ladies and gentlemen.